Day, the 2nd of March, 2026, and it's a full moon super eclipse happening tomorrow morning. The sun will already be set by like 13 minutes when they're saying that we're going to experience it, but we're going to see the peak of the full moon in Virgo probably around midnight, like 12:02 is what they're saying from my location. So anyway, that's something interesting to look at. I'm going to go over some international events and just my interpretation or opinion. And then I'm going to get into some information that I threw into AI just to get feedback regarding feminism and the de-evolution or the devolution of feminism and how it's been hijacked. Before I get into that, I don't know if I shared this yesterday, but it's so interesting to me. So engineer creates a plasma vortex in a magnetic field. So engineer creates a plasma vortex, magnetic field, a small experiment that looks like sci-fi, but it is real plasma physics. An engineer created a plasma vortex inside a magnetic field. You can see the ionized gas twist, stabilize, and form a rotating structure around the field lines. It is a simple demo, but it shows something important. Once you trap and shape plasma with magnetic fields, you can study control, stability, and energy transfer in a very pure form. That is the same core idea behind fusion, propulsion concepts, and high energy research. Yeah, so cool. So what we're calling portals, I think it's cymatics and it's also plasma.
I'm going to use two
And as you can see, I'm obsessed with magnets.
bar magnets. And first of all, I place them with like poles opposite. So of course, they repel each other. If I put a bit of steel now on the pole of that magnet, I don't change the polarity of it by just doing that. If that was a north pole before, then the outside of the steel will still be a north pole, and so it should still repel the other magnet, shouldn't it? Surprise, surprise. Now in that condition, both magnets are pulling on the steel outwards. They're trying to split it in half. Let's give them the opportunity to do that by making it a double piece of steel. Now when I release my fingers, will they in fact succeed in pulling it in half? They do. Now here's a situation, isn't it? In that condition, they just don't want to know each other. But with only a single piece of steel, both magnets are quite happy to attach themselves to it. I told you permanent magnets were going to be difficult, but believe me, there's worse to follow. Suppose I take an unmagnetized steel ball and an unmagnetized bit of steel. I'm going to put the steel ball on the magnet pole. As I approach it and touch it with the unmagnetized bit, I can always succeed in bringing the ball away with the unmagnetized piece. If I put a bit of cardboard in between magnet and ball to begin with, you can actually see the ball jump away from the magnet. I'm going to use two bar magnets, and first of all, I place them with...
Yeah, so when you manipulate the magnetic or electric fields or currents, you can have like a push or a pull. Okay, so manipulating electrons with magnetism.
Guys, this is insane. This is a beam of electrons that is being kept going around in a circle using magnetic fields. Here's the side view so you can see it's going in a circle. If I give the electrons some initial velocity to the left, you can see they actually go in this spiral pattern. This is insane.
Just like the rotation.
Electrons actually move in a helix under a uniform magnetic field if they have some sideways velocity. And then from the
they look like sine waves from like the side view.
Front, look at that. Look at that beautiful helix. You can control the motion of charged particles using magnetic fields. This is one of the coolest things ever. Now, if I twist it back, you can make it go back to a...
Yeah, nothing to do with gravity. That's been debunked, respectfully speaking. The pushing and pulling, the manipulation of energy. Okay, so TRA threatens to kill gender-critical mother. So she says more mastectomies for, I guess, children. I guess this might be ironic. But anyway, this has been circulating around. So
It's not hatred. You guys, it's not hatred to tell a child that they can grow up to be healthy and whole. Surgeon makes off stripping a girl top surgery. Kaiser Permanente charges a $100 copay, and the surgeon makes $25,000. I was approved for a phalloplasty and 2 appointments over Zoom. My doctor told me I could have a fake.
approved for phalloplasty after 2 appointments over Zoom. And some doctors get doctors, Dr. Frankenstein. Anyway, um, they can get like upwards of over $100,000 depending on the surgery.
Penis that would allow me to either be standing up or to have penetrative sex, but not both. Do you think your transgender child might one day have top surgery and a phalloplasty? Is that something you would allow them to have? You know, they make a phalloplasty out of the skin tissue on your thigh or your forearm. It's like a skin sausage. It's a fake penis. $130,000. I'm gonna hunt you down.
Listen to this fucking psycho. I'm going to hunt you down and fucking kill you. That's what she's saying with her hand shaking.
You can't say that. You can't tell somebody you're going to kill them.
And then she runs away.
You can't say that to somebody.
But yeah, anyway. Arrest that woman. A Rodin coil. So this is how a Rodin or Rodin, I don't know how you pronounce that, magnetic field acts on a steel ball when you apply a frequency between 22 and 180 hertz. The magnetic field of this coil is unreal, is what is being said. Okay, saying here too, I'm going to keep showing it, but what if energy isn't meant to be forced but circulated? It is. Anyways, Marco Rodin noticed something strange when doubling numbers. 124875 repeats forever, while 369 sit outside the loop. Not numerology, structure. That same pattern maps perfectly onto a torus. The same geometry seen in magnetic fields, plasma, the human heart, which is also like it's like a funnel. And I do think because it's an electromagnetic organ, that it is somehow shaped and responding to, again, the like the superconducting magnetic core that's possibly made of uranium and plutonium, and then with like mercury and anyway, and all that other stuff that I've talked about in other videos, but influences again the shape and that spiral path that it takes and forms. And then people have even like been able to open up the human heart and lay it out flat. Very interesting. And so there might be connections with us and in this cosmos, even in that way. Okay, so let's see what else it says here. So the Rodin coil isn't free energy. It's a question in copper. What happens when current is guided to circulate instead of fight itself? Physics allows it. Geometry decides efficiency. I'm not chasing over unity. I'm chasing coherence, timing, resonance, and flow. When energy is aligned, less force is needed. 100% agree with that. Tip of our brains too. And then the cerebral spinal fluid being where like these circuits operate and travel within that medium. Okay, this is on the sun. And even old, more ancient, more advanced civilizations, they even utilized what they call these like solar windows. I don't know what you would call them, but where the particles bounce off these tubes and you can create like light into your home without any hooking anything up. It's just based on the angle, the types of materials being used over your house for like these ceiling windows, these I don't know what you would call them, and it can light it up. And so anyways, they would face east right? And so in the mornings, as the sun rises in the east, depending on where you are in the world, anyway, rises in the east, sets in the west. If there was early morning church, for example, if you were going to church, if you had early morning sermons, um, like having it facing the east, you would have there'd be like more sunlight, and even with the glass they used and the colors within like the infrastructure as well, it mattered, and and provided like again these healing frequencies and vibrations as well. Okay, so legend Laird Hamilton on why he doesn't fear the sun. That's not him, by the way. I don't know why that clip's in there. I don't think it's him anyway.
My relationship with the sun is like everybody else, which is if there's no sun, there's no life. I solar gaze, so I'm into solar gazing. I go early in the morning when I can and watch the sun. It affects my whole system. I don't use sunscreen, never have used sunscreen. I'm not a big fan of sunscreen because it's stopping my ability to absorb the sun. You just know how it affects you. If it's rainy for 3 weeks, I can tell you, like when I go get in a blue sky with the sun, I'm like, oh yeah, well, it's like I bathe in it. So it's the sun is, the sun's the king. I told somebody, go take a plant in the garden, spray it with sunscreen for a month, and then see what happens. The thing dies, and I go, you think you're not as connected to the sun as the plant is? Are you crazy? I mean, we have all these diseases that you get when you're not in the sun. Besides depression, I mean, we have actual sicknesses that are from not enough sunlight. We're all connected to the sun, and we all should have a relationship. They say that we're the first culture in history that doesn't worship the sun. We fear it. We hide. We put sunscreen. We're crazy.
And just speaking on this, it came onto my feed after I shared this with a few people, but new study, sunlight penetrates the human body, improving mitochondrial function and vision. So longer wavelengths in sunlight pass through the human body and have a systemic impact, which improves vision, upwards of like 9 to 16% even in some cases. Yeah, penetrates the human torso, rapidly improves mitochondria. Okay, so anyway, there's just more to that. I'm big into sun gazing as well. I thought I had some stuff here on what's going on in Iran. But there are, again, the guy was a dictator, tyrannical, oppressive, what people would call an Islamist Marxist. Maybe I can share something that I was sharing with people regarding it. And again, there are people that are celebrating the fact that he and other dictators, oppressors, have been terminated, and people from within need to get control of their country, take it back. They've been oppressed now for 47 plus years. And I absolutely did say that, yes, America, specifically intelligence agencies and others, did have involvement in, unfortunately, the collapse and who they chose to replace, who they took out, all that stuff, and how a lot of, again, liberties and freedoms that Iranians, Persians had in the 60s and 70s, especially the 70s, when they became more democratic, more what we call westernized. Yeah, completely almost overnight, like these freedoms and liberties taken away, especially from women. And just like Afghanistan too, even in 2021, when there was that disastrous pullout, shortly thereafter, women even more oppressed, not being able to be in the workforce. There's now like an increase in poverty, like 97%, not having children. There's lower birth rates because of that as well. Economically, they are tanking and so much more. And so maybe I'll get into that because there are people that are saying that they're libertarian or that they're conservative or they're Republican, and they're saying that feminism has destroyed society. And I'm going to disagree with that when I talk about feminism in its true form, the original form, and how it's been co-opted, especially in the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years, especially, and co-opted by groups, organizations that are being propagandized, indoctrinated, ideologically brainwashed, living in echo chambers. And there's funding and support and stuff like that to, again, co-opt the movement and again, and make it into what it is. And I'm arguing that it takes away the rights and freedoms from women and ultimately men as well. And so anyways, I'll just get into kind of something I put together. I don't know if it's this one. 1 second here. Maybe it's this one. Okay. So again, I was having conversations with AI, and this is the interpretation of what I put together, but also probably in here some kind of propaganda from Google as well being thrown in the mix. And so the evolution and devolution of feminism from empowerment to ideological erosion. This was like the first round, and then I expand further downward. So traditional feminism centered on merit-based equal rights, voting, divorce, and workforce participation, has historically empowered women and contributed to societal progress by enhancing economic growth, family stability, and innovation. It aligned with democratic values or Republican values, whatever you want to call it, allowing women to balance careers and motherhood in prosperous eras. However, modern New Age feminism, co opted by diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, groups, critical race theory, and the transgender agenda, what we're calling the transgender agenda. I don't even like that it's saying it here. So I would say the LGBTQ plus IA, that includes people that are part of like the Black Lives Matter, the pro-Palestinian, et cetera, where again, a lot of these people are organizing, but they're paid, and it's international influence meant to destabilize society from the inside out, exploiting more vulnerable groups, and again causing division from within. So, yeah, this is a collective issue here, not just women. I mean, it says has okay, and these agendas has devolved into an attack on women's rights. These ideologies prioritize identity over merit, erode safe spaces, scholarships, and protections for biological women, feminize men. Again, so like I could talk for women, but like men, like Matt Walsh and Stephen Crowder, et cetera, like the feminization of men, like that's you're blaming it on women, but you know we should have individual responsibility and call out our. Anyways, I'm just gonna stop rambling. Okay, where was I? See, I gotta stop talking and just read. Promote self-harming narratives that delay marriage and reduce birth rates. This dissertation separates traditional feminism from its modern devolution, examining historical examples of thriving societies with women's rights, decline when rights were revoked, pre-DEI US-Canada contexts, harms of contemporary movements, and the vote's role as a safeguard against cultural threats. Example, immigration from societies with incompatible views on women, like polygamy or treating women as property, or the female genital mutilations, or the acid burn as punishments, not being able to divorce your husband, like all of these things that are practiced right now, underage marriages practiced all over the friggin' world. And anyway, so if there are people, again, because of just how immigration has been mishandled over the last 5 years, especially in the US and Canada, really bad in Canada, and people that are here illegally, with their temporary foreign worker visas expired, with their student visas expired here on, like, it's fraud, with fake certifications, whether it be like in the pharmaceutical, doctors, truckers, etc. There are people that are grifting and exploiting, taxpayer funded, and again, increase in crime, incompatible ideologies in certain cases. Again, not all, but a significant amount. And yeah, so it argues that traditional feminism advanced civilization, while the new movement risks decline by co-opted rights for division. So historical examples of societies thriving with women's rights. When women gained rights like voting and divorce, societies often saw, these are just examples that I gave AI. So again, it just focuses just on what I fed it. It doesn't give other examples sometimes, which is, anyway, it is what it is. But societies often saw economic booms, stable families, and high birth rates, disproving claims that rights harm society. So even in, like, let's say, for example, the 1920s, 30s, 40s, even in the 50s in the US and Canada, they had lower birth rates than what they did in the 60s and the 70s. And by the 80s, like, there was a good balance of the average amount of children that women have. But again, we're seeing a decline. And this is, again, more of a decline since I would say like the year 2000 onwards, but especially since 2010. Okay, so Nordic countries, 1970s to present, we're looking at. So equal rights and prosperity. Nordics led in voting, 1906, 1915. So just to give you an example, in the US it was 1920, and Article 19, and sorry, the 19th Amendment, not Article 19. And just to give you some context for Black men, that is amendment number, sorry, the 15th Amendment, giving them the right to vote, etc. And I think it was like 50 years before women collectively, and it wasn't something that was popular when it first kind of rolled out. And to each their own, but again, it wasn't popular, or it wasn't very commonly known. And again, there was like a lot of propaganda out there as well. And to say that women shouldn't have the opportunity or the right to vote, I'm saying it's not just about ensuring that they're not voting. Sorry, that they don't have the ability to vote out leaders that may, again, where there's a risk of taking their rights away. But anyways, there's more to it than that. I forget where I was going with that. Okay, so yeah, divorce reforms, early 1900s, and workforce equality, 1970s. Birth rates, 1.7 to 1.9 above the EU average, with 1980s, 1990s booms. Thriving total GDP per capita, $80,000 plus, low inequality, high happiness. Women's 70 to 80% participation drove innovation. Parental leave, 49 to 59 weeks, supported families. And so in Nordic countries where they're not having like the same issues with massive immigration, where people are, and again, I don't care where they come from. And in some cases I do, if they're like culturally incompatible or criminals. But it's the amount of people that are moving. They're mostly like moving into like major cities. I've talked about this before. So more urban areas, and we need to have more people living in rural areas. I think like the good balance would be 40% living in urban areas and 60% living in rural areas, or 50-50 at this point, right? But we're at over 82% of people living in urban built up areas, and overdeveloping and over exhausting our grid. Less and less people living in rural areas, and we are getting squeezed out as well in so many different ways. But I was just talking to a woman yesterday in Carleton Place, and she was saying that like as a single mother, she couldn't afford the daycare bills in rural Ontario with like the job that she had. And so she actually had to move out of rural Ontario and move to Carleton Place to be closer to work. And and have a little bit more money, and I guess it was like less for daycare. I don't know, but again, like with the increase in like the carbon taxes and all of that stuff, this is again squeezing people out of rural areas, and such a ridiculous cost for house insurance. It's insane. Again, all these tangents when I should just be focusing on reading. Okay, so where was I? Sorry about that. Not anyway. Oh yeah, and so in Canada and in the US, but especially Canada, like we should be promoting and giving more incentives for Canadians to have children. And right now, just because of how economically depressed we are, the cost of living through the friggin' roof, and people defaulting on their mortgages, etc. And the average age of women in Canada having children, even their first time child, is over the age of 30, and it has been for a while, and we need to fix that as well. And we can't fix that by again like surging the population, and for people saying that we need more of a population, or that we can handle 100 million people because we are such a large country. You're out of your friggin' mind, and you're ignorant. You are ignorant, respectfully speaking. Yeah, 98% of Canada is uninhabited, but if you look at even China, I think it's like 80 to 85% of China is uninhabited. All right. And you look at India as well, people are not expanding outwards. They're overdeveloping and overexhausting like resources in major hubs instead of expanding outwards, and living off more of the land and things like that as well. So there needs to be more incentives for people to farm and things like that as well. People in agriculture, people in fishing communities, mining, drilling, all that stuff. And that would help. Not AI and data centers. New Zealand, 1893, 1950s, suffrage and success. First Nation with women's vote, 1893. Divorce reforms, 1898. Birth rates, 4 in 1890s, approximately 4 in the 1950s boom. Thriving economic growth, low inequality, women-led family welfare reforms. Ancient Rome, Byzantine, AD 565, legal reforms, Justinian laws granted divorce, property rights. Birth rates, high family emphasis, reforms stabilized society. Thriving economic stability, women's business participation influenced Western law. Jeez. Minangkabau, Indonesia, ongoing. Matriarchal, thriving, property inheritance through women, divorce rights, birth rates, stable. Community focused on family, thriving, low inequality, high education, women's decisions drive prosperity. Societal decline when women were, you could talk about so many examples, like even with Cleopatra. And anyway, societal decline when women's rights removed. Revoking rights like vote, divorce has led to stagnation as societies lose women's contributions. Again, I don't like that, just like left it like that. So it gives the Afghanistan example. Rights reversals, banned education work, decline, economy contracted at roughly 20%, poverty 97%. Ancient Rome, post-republic, erosion, rights revoked in feudal systems, decline, economic stagnation, high mortality. Nazi Germany, 1933 to 1945, rollback, confined to domestic roles. A lot of people don't know that the Nazis in Germany, a lot of these people were pushing, again, like the other extreme. There was one extreme with, what was his name? Seymour Herschel or whatever his name was. That first clinic where he was like mutilating people, like crazy stuff. And then again, they tried to like lump in women's rights with that and stuff like that. And anyway, but yeah, confined to domestic roles, like women. It was like they called it the CKC or something like that. Children, kitchen, something else. Anyway, so Iran post 1979 reversal, lost divorce, education rights, decline, poverty rise, brain drain, average child 1.7. Pre-DEI U.S. Canada rights and stability. Pre-DEI 1920 to 2010 approximately. Women's rights boosted merit-based opportunities and family stability. U.S. The TFR was 3.65 in 1960. Divorce was low, 1.6 out of every 1,000. 1920, rights enhanced economy, right? But people that were in abusive or toxic relationships, marriages, they like to have the ability to separate from that. Again, like this is something that I think is critical in advanced civilizations. And as someone who has done, who did volunteer work, working with in a nursing home at a very young age, because my grandmother was a co-partner, whatever you want to call it, for a nursing home, but talking to women there. And then even again, like looking at interviews of women in their older age being interviewed by people, and again, it being, posted online, you see that there were women that did have deep regrets, and regretted the fact that they stayed with their husbands for decades when like this was not a good relationship, abusive, toxic relationship. And so anyway, I don't want to belabor that point too much, but I think it's very important. I'm going to get into religion as well. So Canada TFR 3.94 in 1959, stable families, Christian influence high. All right. And so that's even in the US and Canada during these periods, 1920s to the 1980s, I would say the Christian influence was high. More people did identify as Christians. And with the removal of God out of the education systems and governance, I'm saying to have a secular system of governance, but it is like the foundational frameworks of our legal systems and codes do come from the Christian Bible in a lot of cases. And again, but also the removal of like the monarch and removal of the absolute power being in the hands of the Pope, more Presbyterian, whatever you want to call it, but advancements. Modern devolution. Modern movements co-opted feminism for division, harming women and birth rates. So DEI, critical race theory, prioritize identity over merit, eroding women's gains. Critical race theory promotes self-harm via oppression narratives, delays families. So for the what they're calling it the trans agenda on AI, but the LGBTQ plus IA community that's also been co-opted by people that are mentally unwell, and I'm saying that as respectful as I can, obviously. Like there's no judgment on that. People, but people should not be affirmed in their mental health delusions, just like people that are anorexic should not be affirmed in those behaviors as someone with complex PTSD like myself, being affirmed in negative behaviors that are symptoms of, again, the condition. And autogynephilia, again, like, do not affirm that and support and enable that. Like, what are you doing? So men in women's spaces, sports threatens safety, scholarships, feminizes men, lowering partnerships, birth rates. Again, this is just like not really that elaborate or broken down as much as I'd like it to be. Separation from traditional feminism, traditional focused on merits, rights, modern harms by erasing biology, family. The vote as safeguard against cultural threat. The vote protects women from incompatible cultures. Example, polygamy, women as property, not being able to be in the workforce, not being able to have an education, having to cover your entire body. Anyway, via immigration. Without it, men could strip rights as taxes are paid by all. I don't know why it's even saying that. But again, especially if you're a taxpayer as a woman too, and people are telling you that you don't have a right to vote. Anyway, conclusion. Traditional feminism advanced societies. Modern devolution harms women, contributing to low birth rates via self-harming ideologies. The vote is essential for protection. I don't know what's throwing it in there like that, but okay. I asked to pretty it up a little bit here. So traditional feminism focused on merit-based equal rights. Yeah, voting, divorce, and workforce participation. Historically empowered women and contributed to societal progress. Enhancing economic growth, family stability, and innovation. Okay, so it's just more redundant here. Yeah, so when women gained rights like voting and divorce, societies often saw economic booms, stable families, and high birth rates, disproving claims that rights harm society. Talked about the Nordic countries, more breaking down. And then I gave the example for France also in my rebuttal to like kind of massage like the first response. So France, 1789, 1793, so way earlier. And I've shared this on my Instagram before, but not a lot of people know that, but rights and momentum. So revolutionary governments granted women legal identity separate from husbands, ending perpetual minor status. September 1792, laws set marriage majority at 21. That was in France. 1789, it stopped in 1793. Removing paternal control, divorce legalized on mutual consent, abuse, abandonment, emigration. Women's March on Versailles, October 1789, and armed demonstrations, June 1792, drove change. So maybe seeing a little bit of this in Iran. I don't know. So birth rates, 1700s, 4.5, 1800s, 4, 1920s, 2.5, 1940, 1.8, 1960, 2.7. So this was a good period too. 1980, 1.9, 2000, 1.9, 2010, 2, 2023, 1.7. So it seems to be stable, but that's still low. So you'd probably want to get it to more at the 2.4 level. Also a time where, again, there's a lot of Roman Catholic, Christian influence, identity. So thriving, reform stabilized society amid revolution. Women's activism marked turning points. We talked about ancient Rome. Yeah, Nazi Germany. Wow, they're at 1.4 since 2023. Fell despite incentives. Need more incentives. Need less immigration. So hopefully Iran, again, there's a turning point in history right now. Okay. So US TFR 3.65 in 1960, divorce low, 1.6 out of every 1,000, 1920. Rights boosted economy. Okay, so a little bit more redundant. High pre-DEI boom. 2023, 1.6, that's low. Canada too, we're low. We're so freaking low. 1.3 hydrogen rights gains. Yeah, 1940, 2.7, 1960, 3.9. And then by 1980, again, we're seeing a decline, 1.7. Year 2000, 1.5. Again, like economically speaking as well, like we need to manage our economy way better. And we got friggin' Champagne, who has been part of cabinet destroying this friggin' country from the inside out now for over a decade. And he's like the friggin' finance minister at this point. Like, it's such a slap in the face to Canadians. Yeah, so the trans agenda, men and women, spaces, sports, threatened safety, scholarships, feminizes men, lowering partnerships, birth rates, separation from traditional feminism. Anyway. Traditional feminism advanced societies, modern devolution harms women, contributing to low birth rates via self-harming ideologies. And I don't know why it's... The vote is essential. Our rights are essential. And here is Stephen Crowder's reaction to... Who was it again? Yeah, Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan. Pearl and I haven't seen the whole interview here that he's going to be sharing, but these people are not helping the movement. Not the movement. I hate even saying that. Just like the inherent, not even the inherent, but the rights that women have had over the last 100 years, especially. It's again misinterpreting feminism,
forms of truth,
and just attacking women over the movement or blaming women.
Christianity. Look, full disclosure, friends of the show have become friends with them recently, having had them on the show.
Feminism, I mean.
And you're probably familiar with Andrew Wilson. Rachel Wilson is incredibly well read on the history of feminism. And she just appeared on the Joe Rogan show.
Apparently she's not as well read as she should be.
And you could tell that Joe Rogan was really sitting, and he was just captivated because he was hearing some things that he had never really heard before. She was expounding on some of the things that were discussed in her book, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's Occult Feminism, The Secret History of Women's Liberation. I highly recommend it. It's a very short read. You can do the audiobook, but it's worth it. It seems like one of those things that's clickbait, but it's not.
Right.
She sources it meticulously. So she was on Joe Rogan's show. And I will tell you this. I had, back in the day, there was a lady named Karen Strawn. You can go back and see some interviews with her maybe in 2014. She really...
I also want to say, too, that with the fertility issues that women are experiencing, 40 to 50% of fertility issues that are now being experienced when people are trying to conceive is actually because of the men. And so significant fertility issues, and it is increasing, decline in testosterone, etc. So how is that our fault as women? Right. And so, yeah, we can take the blame and call out people that are like radical leftists, woke ideologues that are completely collapsing society from within. And but I mean, again, it's not just one group, by the way.
Not only influenced me, but informed me on women's suffrage, on women getting the right to vote, and why it was a scam from the get-go. And I remember, let me ask you this. Do you guys ever have those numbers, stats, historical...
And we could be in the workforce and not pay taxes. How about that? Anyway, I'm getting frustrated already.
That you hear, you verify that they're true, but they're so difficult to believe because of how you've been conditioned that you have to consistently go back to them. I get that all the time. I used to get that with Donald Trump, closing down the border, like 95% reductions in border crossings. I'm like, there's no way that's possible. There's no way that could happen in a year. I know it to be true, but it's hard. That's why you can't always trust your gut. Same thing happened with me, I think, in 2014 when I learned that the overwhelming majority of women did not want the vote. It was hugely unpopular, which brings us to the first clip of Rachel Wilson on Joe Rogan's show.
I would think, okay, well, I think women should have the right to vote. They're human beings. They live here. There's laws that are being going.
Women pay taxes and everything. And before the 1920s, we weren't really in the friggin' workforce. And we did see a lot of innovation and development in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, largely also with the assistance of women. And again, I don't like being on with my freaking cigar and stuff like that, but I'm already amped up. And so, because I know what she's going to come up with. And again, ideas or movements, again, they're like oftentimes like they're not going to be popular. There's going to be resistance, especially again if it's enabled by more propaganda.
Really didn't want to be involved in politics. They let them vote on whether they wanted the vote. In the biggest referendum was in Massachusetts. So they let women vote on whether they wanted the vote in a referendum. Of the women that showed up, not a lot of them showed up. It was a fairly smallish number, but of the thousands that showed up to vote, only 4% wanted suffrage on the ballot.
That's crazy.
Only 4%. So guess what Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony did after that? All the pro-suffrage leaders, they banned women from voting on whether they wanted to vote.
Oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And then men gave women the right to vote.
That's right.
Think about that for a second. Now, that's a small study. We've given you numbers in the past where it's anywhere from 70 to 80-something% if you try and take the totality of data as far as women who
So
were...
you were already following suit from what was already happening, movements in Europe, when what was happening in Nordic countries. You saw how they became more advanced by doing that.
Against the vote. She explains why that was the case. I've gotten into that, but you do need to know that top line number. The overwhelming majority of women did not want the vote because of what it came with, because they felt that they had influence, and because they didn't want women to be ruined through the process of politics. And they thought they would lose some influence and leverage. And here's something else. This transitions to, okay, so that's the case, but people will say it's a good thing that they have the vote. And feminism, right, has been a good thing overall. Choice. Who could be against choice? Well, Rachel got into that, and I think articulated this pretty well. Most women would choose to be stay-at-home moms, something that feminists proactively they denied the vote for the vote. They also wanted to prevent women from having the option to stay home.
He's taking red herrings from, like, again, just like what a lot of people are doing on the left and right, but they're taking the most extreme people and they're quoting them and they're making it as if the entire population of women within that demographic are aligned to that, right? So like, even though like I think there's a lot more crazy people within like the liberal government right now, respectfully speaking, do I think that I think there's a higher percentage of people that are brainwashed and indoctrinated, but there are a lot of people within the liberal, the people that voted liberal, that again, they're just normal friggin' people going along to get along, or really not paying attention to anything, and that's men and women.
So women right now, if you say, well, I can't have it all, I have to make a choice, you can thank feminists who wanted to ensure that you couldn't stay home with your kids, but
bullshit.
You outsourced that.
See, this is the stuff that Pearl says as well, like we hate women and that we hate traditional women, etc. Anyone that considers himself to be someone that does believe that women should have the right to vote, that we should have the right to be in the workforce, that we should be merit-based, etc., etc. Like, I still believe that obviously the women should be having children and being at home raising their children, and that's something that I would have liked for myself as well, but it didn't line up, right, for various reasons, and also with fertility issues with my partners. Anyways, too much information, but and so it didn't pan out. But like my sister and my brother, they had 3 and 4 kids respectively, and again, like I thought and still think that is the right thing and the way to live, for the majority of a population in order to sustain itself, to thrive, to evolve, etc., to a limit, right? Because we also see a link to, again, higher birth rates, especially in countries, for example, like Africa, higher birth rates, and there is a link to women that, again, with lack of education, obviously not in the workforce, etc., with that as well. And then child mortality rates being higher for various reasons as well. And anyways, there is a balance. Not too many, me, not too little.
Do just women enough. Really want to be in the workplace, or are they only kind of really choosing the girl boss stuff?
That's a giant generalization anyway.
Right, like, of course it is.
Obviously, some women do and some women don't. And there's a lot of women who naturally, maternally want to have children, want to have a family.
Yep. Simone de Beauvoir, arguably the biggest feminist of second wave, that French intellectual
She's
who
saying second
was
wave.
buddies with Jean-Paul Sartre, and they got in trouble for grooming underage kids and seducing them and all kinds of crazy stuff. But she's respected as the greatest feminist intellectual of the 20th century, and she was super influential. And in a 1970s interview with Betty Friedan, she said,
Don't know who that is.
I don't believe that society should give women the opportunity or the choice to stay home and be mothers, because if we do,
crazy.
they're all going to pick that. And I don't think it should be an option. So
Oh my God.
it was the view of the feminists that, and Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton said that. They said, we would have never passed suffrage had it not been for men. If it was ever left up to women alone, we would have never passed suffrage. They would have never gone for it. They don't want liberation.
She's speaking again. It's so frustrating when I gave you the example of France in the 1700s, in the 18th friggin' century, again 100 years before in the U.S. and these other places, and then it was taken away from them, like basic rights, not being property, as if we're as if we're children, not having property rights, not being able to divorce, even if there's abandonment, emigration, abuse, etc. And there are Christians, a lot of Christian women that do vote. They vote more conservative, Republican, obviously. And anyway, I think it has more to do with a lack of God
And
economy.
I really hope that if you're watching this, and I know we have plenty of women who watch, but I hope that you sit down and watch this with your wife or your significant other, if you're a man, because there are some truths that are really uncomfortable. And that's something we need to break through. If we have this conversation, actually the 19th may have been a mistake in a lot of ways. People go, whoa, you must be a showman. Hold on. And actually, not just third wave feminism, all feminism may have been not just a mistake, but a very evilly influenced movement.
Yep.
And it's antithetical to all forms of true Christianity when you understand its roots. It's an uncomfortable conversation to have. It's kind of a third rail, but we gotta be honest about it.
Equal rights. I'm going to go on these tangents about even with gay rights and with women rights within Christian societies, where the rules, the constitutions, the Declaration of Independence, etc. These are charter. Again, the foundational framework is based on Christian religion, and people flee oppression from other countries where even being gay, you can be stoned to death. Punishment is death. People come to Christian countries, or what used to be predominantly Christian countries, where again they're protected. And so spare me again. I just go.
And that's why I think this conversation was incredibly
I don't even like to use the word feminist anymore, but talking as if all feminists, like none of them are Christian. When the majority of them at one point were.
Valuable. And I do think that it's going to become a reference piece. Here's another one. Rachel talks about this. You've heard me discuss this. You've heard me cite those people, by the way, and change my mind. Simone de Beauvoir was sort of the godmother of modern gender theory, though it still exists.
The far left taking women's rights and safe spaces away, and also the far right calling themselves libertarian now as well, that are, again, want to take women's rights away. It's just unbelievable.
Listed within a binary before we got to John Money and all of these things. Rachel goes on to talk about how feminists like Margaret Sanger, who I've discussed, and Nazis, kind of one and the same, they were eugenicists. And they decided to make a part of that eugenics plan, not just abortion. We all talk about that. But birth control may be a blind spot for a lot of people.
See, so ignorant.
She was getting
They were literally like the CKC, which is maybe why they called it the KKK in the US. I don't know, but it was literally about having women be in the kitchen having babies. That's literally it.
Paid by the Rockefeller Foundation and promoted by people like H.G. Wells, who she was also having an affair with. They're all a bunch of creepers, Joe, I'm telling you. He was a eugenicist who loved the idea of millions of abortions a year.
H.G. Wells, the War of the Worlds guy, was a eugenicist.
Yep. Feminism was instrumental in that. That's actually where the birth control pill came from as well. Margaret Sanger, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kaiser Wilhelm Foundation, and a lot of Nazi scientists are the ones who started synthesizing human hormones to make birth control pills. And the way they sold that was they said, look, we know abortion's very unpopular. People don't like it. It's a very terrible thing that we have to do. We have to do it because we don't want all these babies. Ugh. But, if you let us have the birth control pill and you make it like widely available and socially acceptable, abortion will be a thing of the past. Nobody will need one ever again. That's how it was marketed and sold to the world. And it sounds right. It sounds reasonable. Maybe it's better. Maybe it's better just to prevent all the pregnancies and then we don't have to worry about abortions. But here we are in 2026. You can get abortion or you can get birth control pills for $4 at Walmart. You can go down to your local health department in your county and get them for free if you're under a certain income status. And we still have, well, at least before they overturned Roe v. Wade, we still had about 1 million abortions a year in this country.
And that's super important, isn't it? We have, the roots of feminism. And she does get into the occult, by the way, and a lot of spiritualism. And some of it isn't necessarily evil in the way that you would think. It's just degenerate. And it really was sort of people selling snake oil. They knew that they were scamming folks. She's very good at sort of outlining that in the book. So you have the roots of it. All right, it's antithetical to you as a Christian. You cannot be a Christian feminist. It's just not a thing. And then we look at the results. The results are bad. The results are worse. Everything that women have been promised was a lie. The results have been the opposite from feminism. And I want to be clear, this is not just third wave feminism. From its inception, and that was the goal. And that's because feminism is definitively, this is objectively true. It's a subset of Marxist ideology. That was part of the Marxist playbook, right? Divide and conquer. You're not going to have the numbers.
The Marxists and the Nazis, extremists. Both not good for women. Or men, by the way, and they're still not addressing the male fertility issues, the decrease in the testosterone, the obesity rates, diabetes rates, the allergies, asthmas, et cetera, like not being in like the first responder type roles as much. So women having to fill those friggin' positions because, again, it's volunteer based at this point. And anyway.
Unless you break up the family.
I'm still waiting for a response from Grok.
And you have
something I asked.
Women becoming nagging harpies, to be clear. And I will tell you this, I don't really take part. We do this show, and I hope the work speaks for itself. We provide all the references. I don't take part in a lot of outside projects, but because I think this is important enough, they did approach me regarding a debate course specifically on feminism, because I think that's a battlefront that's going to be incredibly important, especially when you look at relationship dynamics. She mentioned it on Joe Rogan's show. Here it is.
I'm glad you brought that up. I just finished a huge project that I'm working on with Andrew, my excellent, handsome husband.
All right, so because Grok, it was not responding, so I just went on Google. And so Nazis and anti-woman narrative. So the Nazi regime, 1933-1945, implemented a strict anti-feminist, patriarchal narrative. You dumb fucking idiots. Sorry for swearing. I just get so frustrated. That aimed to relegate women entirely to the private sphere, defining their value solely by their ability to bear children for the Aryan race. Sound familiar? This ideology, summarized by the slogan Kinderkirche, I'm probably pronouncing that really wrong, Children, Kitchen, Church, that's what it was, Children, Kitchen, Church, was designed to remove women from political, academic, and professional life. So yeah, the Nazis, not good, and neither are the Marxists. That's the far left, the Soros foundations, Rockefellers and stuff like that he's talking about. The Nazi ideological narrative on women, the maternal ideal, the ideal Aryan woman was expected to be robust, blonde, blue-eyed, and devoted entirely to motherhood and domestic chores. Anti-feminism, the Nazis considered women's rights and feminism anti-German and degenerate. Sound familiar? That's what we're hearing now more and more. Anyway, remnants of the Weimar Republic, they believed political participation was incompatible with a woman's natural role. Professional exclusion, women were forced out of civil service, university teaching, and medical professions. So nurses, teachers, etc., where it has been historically women, like even within wars, in these roles, not anymore. Physical and social control. The regime banned makeup and smoking for women in public. Sexuality was permitted only for reproduction. Liberated women were labeled antisocial. pronatalism to boost the birth rate, which again that we do need to do, but again there's a way to do it. Anyway, the state created the Cross of Honor of the German Mother for women with 4 or more children. Abortion was strictly prohibited and severely punished. I do believe that women should have the right to choose up to a certain point, and people would argue like the heartbeat law, or when a baby, if it's outside of the womb, if it would be able to survive on its own, and that in Canada it's like the 24-week mark of pregnancy. So anything after that, unless it's like at risk for the mother's life, and again this is very, very rare. And at that point, I would even disagree with people where there was like, it's a hard one, but like with rape or incest involved, when it's a human life that can survive outside of the womb at that point onwards, or the chances are high. But again, I think it should be much lower than that. But I digress. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, okay. So here we are. Contradictions and wartime necessity. Leadership contradiction. While demanding women stay at home, the Nazi Party established the NS Frauenschaft, the National Socialist Women's League. Interesting, Socialist Women's League, led by Gertrude Schultz-Klink, to organize women, wartime labor. As men were sent to the front, the regime was forced to reverse its policies and pressure women into factories and agricultural labor to support the war effort. Same thing in Canada and the US. Women in uniform, though not in combat at that time. Hundreds of thousands of women served as auxiliaries in the Luftwaffe, operating searchlights and radar. Perpetrators and victims. Perpetrators, while many women were oppressed, thousands participated in the regime by acting as camp guards in Ravensbrück, or by taking administrative roles in the occupation of Eastern Europe. True. Victims, Nazi policies targeted undesirable women for sterilization and murder, including Jewish, Roma, and disabled women. Sexual violence. Sexual violence was used as a tool of terror, particularly against Jewish women, and enforced brothels within concentration camps. Again, it's a lot of Jewish narratives, but there was Christians as well, obviously. Post-war narrative. Initial view. Early studies often portrayed German women merely as passive victims of the regime. Modern understanding, modern historiography. Claudia Kuhns highlights that many women were active participants who helped solidify the Nazi regime, navigating between roles as victims and perpetrators. And we're seeing some of the people on the Epstein list, women that were victims and perpetrators. And again, people like Pearl and this friggin' woman that was on Joe Rogan, not helping. Like you sound like a friggin', you know what I'm talking about. That's what you sound like. All right, I'm gonna keep it going, even though it's friggin' painful to listen to.
And Stephen Crowder, Dr. David Patrick Harry, and Rob Knorr, who's a champion debater, we put together a feminist debate course that's coming out really soon. I think this week.
Not gonna watch it.
I think it drops this week. And we go over all these myths and debunk them, and we show people and demonstrate like how to debate this feminism thing, because it's a leviathan, it's a beast. If you take it on, like, one of the reasons I'm out here doing it is because when men try to argue against feminism or feminists, they immediately get slapped with, you're a misogynist, you hate women, you're an incel, all the tropes. You have a small dick, what are you, gay? Like, just all the insults, right? Well, when I sit in front of them and make those arguments, you can't really just get away with that. You have to contend with them because I'm a woman.
Right.
I mean, you could try to insult me, but it's not going to land the same as when you do that.
I would love to debate her.
And here's something I will say that I love about Rachel. You'd be surprised. Legitimately, she's the meaner one of her and Andrew. But she's not mean. She's just very dismissive. She'll be like, yeah, I know. People think that, but that's not really true, is it? And she'll set you straight.
Yeah, and then
You need people like this. You need someone who's an actual mom.
Oh,
who understands
this is what I mean. This is
someone who is actually
if you don't have a
strong
child,
woman, by the way, if you know her life,
then you don't have a say.
Story, as well as physically, she did a lot of powerlifting. Discussed that with Joe Rogan. Someone who's actually strong, who can advocate
powerlifter too.
On behalf of femininity. Officer,
when it was merit based and friggin' hard, and they did not want women in. I will assure you of that. and then incorporated and worked as an international security analyst, executive protection, trained the highest levels of government to respond to natural and man-made disasters, etc. And so, yeah, I can speak a little bit on this topic as well, as someone who could be seen as someone who believes that women should have equal rights and opportunities. And if they're going to be in the workforce, just like anyone else, it'd be merit-based, and there'd be more incentives within society in order to allow women to have the ability to stay home and have children. Economically, the way society is right now, even with things like pornography and with video games and with like social media like Tinder and things like that, it's just been so it's co-opted our society, I would say, and again made men not like they used to be as well, respectfully speaking. And in some cases good, some cases bad, because men have to be a little bit better behaved in relationships. You know, if there is the risk for divorce, if you're abusive or toxic or an addict, et cetera, that, you know, you have to do better if you want to keep, your marriage. If there is that risk of a possible divorce, or a woman being able to support herself if she's in an abusive relationship, whether there be kids involved or not, in order to, and then be able to have that independence and the ability to find a more suitable partner for this life journey together, if that makes any sense.
In traditional relationships. And that's why I was moved to take part. Look, everything I know, I included here. They have a debate course. You can buy it for $250 or $150 if you purchased the previous debate course, Verbal Combat. Yeah. You can go to debateuniversity.com. It is a multi-part series. You have installments with Andrew. There's one with me. There's one with Rachel that I cannot recommend enough. Verbal Judo, How to Debate Feminism.
You don't have to be the next Julius Caesar in order to change the world.
I would say that my approach is probably more suitable if you find yourself at a dinner table, because that's not always in Andrew's wheelhouse. God love him.
All right. Enough of that. All right. Any more I can say without belaboring points? I don't agree with literally like 98% of what they were talking about. And but I will say that I do agree with a lot of what he has to say on a lot of other topics. And so I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but this is a bone of contention with me. And again, this is like Nazi propaganda that's being pushed again. And again, there are current examples right now and from the past where, again, equal rights for women not being seen as property, being able to have property, being able to have the ability to divorce, et cetera, have some say, and then also contributing financially. No. So I made this post on the 9th of February, and for some reason the comments are now turned off. I did not turn them off myself, and there was one person that had commented, and I had given this response, and I'm like, well, you know, I might as well put it as the description, and I'm glad I did, because now that the comments are off, like my response back to this guy that was calling me a lazy historian, and I'm like, I'm not even a historian, first of all. I'm not an international security analyst, and I clearly, I guess, know more about history than you do. And so this was my a historian reacting to Matt Walsh, and I was sharing that. And so anyway, this was from, again, AI, which can be beneficial, but you have to know going into it that you like, there are things that will be absolutely incorrect within the responses. So unless you know a bit about the topic beforehand, like, you can get incorrect information. So looking at history exclusively through a modern American-centric racial lens, where slavery is framed solely as something white people did to non-white people, distorts the broader, brutal reality of human history. And so the reason why I'm just finishing up with this is because I just watched last night Matt Walsh's, I don't know if you'd call it a documentary or whatever, but it was regarding like the indigenous tribes within America, the real history. And I don't know when he had posted that, but this was from the 9th of February, and I shared this. And I think that again, there's a lot of things that are missing in the current mainstream narrative. Because again, even that guy that commented, he like was a troll, but like, it's like, you're wrong. And he could have easily, again, fact-checked himself before even trolling me. So again, laziness. So when discussing specific events like the Trail of Tears, which Matt Walsh had talked about in that video I saw last night, which was really well done, the focus naturally zooms in on the U.S. government and the specific chattel slavery of that era. And it says it's talking about, however, you are absolutely right that zooming out reveals that slavery was a universal human institution practiced by empires, tribes, and nations across every continent long before the transatlantic trade began. So here's a factual context regarding the global history of slavery. You mentioned removing any singular racial blame. Indigenous slavery before European contact. It is a verified historical fact that Native American societies practiced slavery long before the first European arrived. The scale, from the Arctic down to South America, pre-Columbian slavery was widespread. For example, among some indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, like the Haida and Tlingit, and Matt Walsh had named other ones as well, as much as 25% of the population consisted of slaves captured during raids on neighboring tribes. The Aztec and Maya, both empires relied heavily on slavery. People were enslaved as prisoners of war, as punishment for crimes, or to pay off debts. Many were used as forced labor to build temples, and thousands were used as human sacrifices all over this bitch before Europeans came. So warfare and captives. In North America, tribes like the Iroquois and Comanche frequently took captives during wars. While some captives were eventually assimilated or adopted into the tribe to replace dead relatives, often after enduring ritual torture, others were kept in perpetual servitude, traded, or used as human currency. Note the distinction historians make is the pre-Columbian slavery was usually based on warfare, tribal affiliation, or debt, rather than the race-based inherited chattel system that the five tribes later adopted from the American South. Sure. However, the fundamental reality of humans owning other humans was already deeply embedded in the Americas and again all over the world. So the enslavement of white Europeans, the erasure of white enslavement from modern historical discourse is a valid frustration. For centuries, millions of Europeans were hunted, captured, and sold into brutal slavery by North African, Arab, and Ottoman empires. The Barbary slave trade. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, corsairs, pirates, operating out of the Barbary coast of North Africa, modern-day Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and Libya, systematically raided the coastlines of Europe. Historians estimate that between 1 million and 1.25 million white Europeans were captured and sold into slavery, maybe more. And not just Europe. I guess you would classify it as Europe, but I'm talking like Greenland, Iceland, like all the Nordic areas as well. The reach of the raids, these were not just Mediterranean skirmishes. African and Arab slave raiders struck coastal towns in Italy, Spain, and Greece, and sailed as far north as Ireland, England, and Iceland. Entire coastal villages in Europe were depopulated or abandoned out of fear of slave raids. Men were worked to death in quarries or galleys, and women were sold into harems. Yeah, they were the ones that were rowing a lot of their vessels under brutal conditions, chained to where the oars are. You're basically in an upright position the whole time, and that's how you live your life. Like not even seeing like the sun or anything like that, and like you have to expel your friggin' waste literally where you're kind of like upright sitting. And again, people were saying that they could smell these ships coming from like a mile away because of that. Okay, so the Ottoman Empire and Crimean, I don't know how to pronounce that, can I? Further east, the Ottoman Empire and the Crimean Tatars enslaved an estimated 2 to 3 million Eastern Europeans and Russians between the 15th and 18th centuries. The demand for slaves was so high in the Islamic world that capturing and selling Slavic people became the backbone of the Crimean economy. Summary: the uncomfortable truth about human history is that no single race invented slavery, and no single race was exempt from its horrors. Africans enslaved Africans, Indigenous Americans enslaved Indigenous Americans, Europeans enslaved Europeans, and Middle Eastern and North African empires enslaved millions of Europeans and Africans alike. Acknowledging the specific historical actions of the American government during the 1800s shouldn't require placing the entire international sin of slavery on the shoulders of white people when we in fact actually ended slavery and fought wars and died on the seas and in civil wars to end it in the Americas. Long rant today. So anyways, on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.